Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIcke.com.
Our guest needs very little introduction, so I won't waste time introducing him. Among the many books he's written over the years that have travelled around the world, he wrote The Biggest Secret. He was writing it in 97. It was published in 98. He named Edward Heath while Heath was alive. He was still a sitting MP. The chapter in the book that dealt with Heath's crimes was read to Heath, and Heath declined to pass comment or to do anything about it. Let's welcome back our friend and my colleague David Icke. Welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Rich.
Well, what do you reckon to what you've been hearing today, and particularly the response by, let's call them the establishment, the media establishment and the political class to what Mike Veal produced? What do you think?
Well, it's all staggeringly predictable, and we are where we were before the Savile revelations broke. See, whenever things happen that can't be denied, like when the revelations about Savile came out, this record-breaking paedophile, also a Satanist, who was a BBC entertainer and a close friend of the British royal family and Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister, and Edward Heath. He knew him very closely. When they reach a point where the revelations are so enormous, they can't deny them, they go into two modes. First of all, we need an inquiry, and the inquiry is to throw the story and the subject way into the future, where they can, as best as they can, bury it, and people then forget about it.
David might have just dropped out there momentarily. It's been an issue, hasn't it, the last couple of nights we've checked?
Different now. New checks and balances are in place. And what happened with Savile and what they were absolutely mortified about is not just what was revealed about him, but where it could lead. We're not talking about just individuals here. We're talking about a web. We're talking about networks, ultimately one network. And once you expose a strand in the network, a strand in the web, then more strands become open to being exposed. And where's it going to end? So they are terrified, especially when famous people are involved, because of the potential publicity and the public interest, of where it could lead. So, for instance, when they were in hysteria about Savile in the media and the story first broke, they were quite okay up to a point to isolate it with Savile. But as I've said, Savile was a very, very close friend for decades, introduced to the inner circle of the royal family by his own words, by Lord Mountbatten, who was a known paedophile. And he was a close associate of Margaret Thatcher and many other people in this Westminster web of political paedophilia. The media wouldn't go there. There was mention, because they couldn't avoid it, he knew the royal family, but gone, finito, don't mention it again. And it's the same with all these other connections. There was no way they were going to go into the fact that the reason that Jimmy Savile was able to survive decade after decade after decade with his record-breaking paedophilia, well, we now know the police knew about it. Of course, the intelligence agencies knew about it. You can't cough in any proximity to the British royal family without they know your background and everything about you. So they didn't know that Savile was a record-breaking paedophile. Of course they did. So how was it that he was protected right the way to his last breath, from going where he should have been, which was in a jail cell with the key thrown mid-Atlantic, because he was a procurer of children for the rich and famous, as well as being a paedophile himself. And thus, he had the background to so many different people. And if they thought that Savile was going to reveal anything, of course, Savile would have had an accident. But Savile was really in there because he wanted to be in there. He was part of the network. He wasn't going to reveal anybody as long as they left him alone. And so instead of getting rid of him, they protected him. And they protected him so he could go on supplying children for the rich and famous, including Ted Heath. And with Heath, it's a similar situation, you see. See, when you have a paedophile who is exposed, who is running a children's home, okay, it's some sick, weird person running a children's home. Okay, okay. Yeah, I see the story. But we're talking about a prime minister. We're talking about the man who, more than any other politician, was responsible for us being in what is now the European Union. And therefore, when you're talking about that level, the potential for kicking off further into the web at a high level is enormous. So the last thing they want is for people to take this seriously, because if you think about it, if a sitting prime minister is a paedophile, and he was more than that, he was a Satanist, as I said in The Biggest Secret, then what else is going on? What else is possible? And what I feel about the report, and of course this is only a summary of a report, apparently the full report's about 350 pages long.
Yeah, it's long, yeah.
I think it's the best we could have hoped for, to be honest, for this reason. One, Mike Veal, who headed the report, the Wiltshire Chief Constable, was, as we know, under fantastic pressure, ongoing throughout the years since he announced the inquiry would go ahead, either to ditch it, to conclude there was nothing in it, so that there was no case to answer. Because of this pressure, there was no way he was going to go with anything that he wasn't absolutely certain about. He wasn't going to go there. So these 7, and apparently another 2, were pulled at the very last minute because they wanted to just go with what they were absolutely sure about. These 7 allegations, he was quoted in one newspaper through an anonymous source a few weeks ago as saying that he was 120% sure that some of the allegations against Heath were true. And this 7, the inquiry team will have been certain about, because they would not have gone with this, even to the point of saying we would have interviewed him under caution had he been alive, unless they were sure. So while they're saying there is no assumption of guilt or innocence, we should also say the same about many of the other allegations in the inquiry, including some of Heath's satanic connections and ritual satanic behavior, because they did not have the evidence to be so sure that they could actually go with them. It doesn't mean they're not true. It means it couldn't pass that line where they were really sure enough that they could support it, that they could actually go public with a number. Yes, we think there is a case to answer on these, and therefore there are many other allegations, I'm sure, that would have had validity had they been known about earlier, because this is another reason why we have pretty much got as good as we were going to get. It's because of the time that's passed. You know, when they say, oh, there were these allegations and these allegations, but we couldn't go with them in the end because there wasn't sufficient evidence to pass our if you like, our test of how much we believe there was a case to answer. You're looking at things that are alleged to have happened decades and decades ago. Where are you going to produce the evidence to go through a court of law that long ago? How are you going to prove that the satanic rituals you say that Heath abused you at actually happened? By their very nature, they happen in secret, and they're incredibly secretive and done undercover. That's the nature of Satanism, especially when it involves the rich and famous. So given all this pressure, given how long ago so many of these allegations go back to, I think we have got as good as we could have hoped for in the circumstances. And I do hold my hand up to Mike Veal, because here is a courageous man who, for his own benefit, probably his own career benefit from here on in, who knows, could have walked away from this, could have said, no, I'm not going there. And there are many people in the police force who would have done that, but he didn't. And he deserves our support and our thanks, really, for not bowing to the pressure and actually at least getting this far.
He's incredibly courageous, and you made the point that he's been under enormous pressure since day one. I just want to make a point. Some of our listeners are tweeting about Edward Heath. There's some tweets I can't see, but people are saying that, you know, when we go back to 1997, 1998, you know, guilty or innocent, Heath wouldn't have sued. I just want to make one thing clear. I've never claimed to be an expert in anything, but I'm an expert in libel law, both in the UK and in Ireland. I've studied it extensively. Commercial stations sent me on course after course after course over the years, and I covered libel cases for radio stations, commercial and national. Edward Heath would have went for David Icke and davidicke.com and the publisher of The Biggest Secret. If Edward Heath was innocent, he would have done. 100% he would have done. It's as simple as that.
Let me say this, Rich. Here's a coincidence, or a few. I was told about Heath during the 1980s from a number of different sources. Yeah. I'm not a kamikaze pilot. You know, I don't take something from one person and then just repeat it.
Absolutely.
But I'd heard it from enough people to cross the line of, there is a case to answer here. There's too many connections, common themes going on from people that had no connection with each other whatsoever. 17 years later, a police investigation starts into Edward Heath. 17 years later, while I named him when he was still alive, and the passage, like you say, was read to him in the week of publication. I also named in The Biggest Secret Lord Alistair McAlpine, Margaret Thatcher's Svengali for her entirety as Prime Minister, and indeed before. He was one of the major people that got her into power in the first place. And he was still alive. In fact, when I named him, he was still a very, very public figure. And then years and years and years later, after the Savile story broke, victims start naming Lord Alistair McAlpine. And of course, there was that tremendous furore and pressure to put a lid on that. And one of the ways that he sought to do that was to threaten libel actions. He got a massive sum from the BBC, who didn't name him. in that Newsnight interview. If you recall, he wasn't named.
That's right.
But the BBC paid him a massive libel sum of money. The ITV television station paid him a vast sum of money in a libel settlement for a guy called Philip Schofield handing a piece of paper to the Prime Minister, David Cameron, which to see what was on it, you had to freeze frame and be get the magnifying glass out.
Yeah, you turn yourself upside down.
And he got a big payout from that. He threatened everyone on Twitter who even indicated that he was guilty of paedophilia. He threatened them with legal actions en masse. He won a libel action against the wife of the Speaker of the House of Commons, who didn't name him, and I named him. I named him in The Biggest Secret, 1997-98, and I named him on the website in this period where he's threatening libel actions to everybody and winning many who weren't naming him. What did he do to me? Nothing. Nothing. Day after day, I would put stuff on. Nothing. And then it turns out that Alistair McAlpine was the owner, as I put on the website at the time that this furore was going on, was the owner of a collection of art featuring naked or near naked children by the so-called artist called Graham Ovenden, who was later jailed for paedophilia. And a judge had Ovenden's collection, which he owned, destroyed. I was told about Leon Britton back in the 1990s, but not by enough people for it to cross my line at that time, though it later did. And years later, Leon Britton is suddenly the subject of allegations by people. None of these people had anything to do with me in the 90s, completely different people, about his background in all this, who was a member of the Thatcher cabinet, Home Secretary, when clearly, and this is part of this inquiry that is going on at the moment into the wider paedophile networks and paedophilia in Britain, instigated by Theresa May when she was Home Secretary. And part of that, which was being or supposed to be investigated before Britain died, was what happened to a dossier given to him by an MP naming political paedophiles, which went missing.
The Dickens dossier.
After it got to Britain. I mean, in a book called The Perception Deception, I go into this whole paedophile network in great detail. When you know what goes on, when you meet people who've been abused by these people, and what it's done to their lives, and then you see these excuses for journalists who, instead of supporting and giving balance to allegations against someone like Heath, immediately start batting for him, as you heard with that Sky News clip. It's disgusting. It's beyond disgusting. So all these things where I've named people, and suddenly years and years later, other people come out and there's an inquiry, etc. That's all a coincidence, right? Right? That's just complete coincidence. No, it's not. It's because there is this web, and this is the point. People have said, well, what is the point? There's people defending Heath. What is the point of looking into this thing? He's dead now. I'll tell you what the frickin' point is. The networks that these people were part of then are still active now.
Still doing
They haven't gone away. Oh, no, things are different. They're not different now. They're the same as they've always been. As we are speaking here now, there are children in this country, there are children in America, there's children all over the world. But talking about the topical happenings of today, there are children in this country who are being abused by the rich and famous through the very same rings that these people were part of. What we're looking at is not historic child abuse, but an historic expression of a web that still functions today. And that's why this is important. And that's why it's great to see someone with a backbone at last, like Mike Veal, who has actually gone with something. His life would have been much easier had he not gone with it. But, you know, it's not just confined to sexual abuse and violent abuse of children. We're also talking about Heath's background as a Satanist. In that passage that was read to him when The Biggest Secret came out in 1998 was the passage about his involvement in Satanism. And as I've said in the books, these satanic rings and pedophilia rings, they connect. They're interconnected. And therefore, it was no shock to me after the revelations about Jimmy Savile that it then started to come out that Jimmy Savile was also a Satanist. This is how it works. Now, let's take a deep frickin' breath here. We are talking about people who are making decisions affecting the lives of every man, woman, and child in this country and in America and Canada and elsewhere, because this is a global web, a global ring in the end. And these are the characters. These are the psychopathic people who can abuse children, can actually ritually abuse children, can sacrifice children, and have no empathy whatsoever, no compassion, no decency, no emotional connection to those who they make suffer in such an horrific way. Do we really now have any more surprise that these same people can then order the carpet bombing of Libya and the destruction of Syria and the destruction of Iraq, that can run an economic system that has the 1% absorbing everything to the detriment of everyone else, down to the fact that people are dying in a world of plenty from hunger and disease that is completely avoidable? What kind of personality does it take to do that and have no emotional consequence whatsoever? I'll tell you what it is. It's the personality type that can abuse kids, can ritually sacrifice kids, that can make kids watch animals being sacrificed, that can make kids watch other kids being sacrificed, and told it will be them if they don't do as they're told or they tell anybody about what's going on. And one of the reasons there are not more people, two of the reasons there are not more people coming out and exposing this monster Heath and these other people, is because they well know the consequences of taking these people on, of exposing these people. They know that not only are their lives suddenly in danger, but what chance have they got of actually being heard when you see the reaction today in defense of this monster Heath? That's why they stay silent. And there's another reason. A lot of the people abused by Heath are dead. He was a famous man. He was frickin' prime minister. Do you think they're going to let kids who could recognize him go out and talk about it? Not a chance. Honestly, people need to start realizing the scale of evil that is running human society. And those pathetic excuses for journalists, those clueless people who instinctively take the side of the establishment on everything, like that. Well, I won't even call him a journalist. We had insult to real journalists on Sky News just now.
The Muppet, yeah.
Well, I mean, Muppets. I'm not sure even that suffices, Rich.
No, it's dreadful. It's dreadful.
They are the people that play a crucial role in keeping this quiet. And whenever people start talking about it, as I've been talking about it for decades now, and writing about it, you're a nutter. Not once in all this period since the Heath investigation began has the mainstream media even mentioned that back in 1998 I named him in a book. Why? Because they don't want to give people like me any credibility with the public. Well, if he was right about that, well, what else is he right about?
Yeah.
Because they don't want people to go there. Basically, what they're trying to do today is say, in the classic police parlance, move along now, move along, nothing to see here. It's all over, thank you, goodbye, get on with your lives. Well, I, for one, I'm not staying silent. No way.
I didn't see a single man or woman from victim supports groups or a survivor of child abuse being invited on the programmes today to talk about why it's important that we look at the historical allegations. They rolled out, I could have played Heseltine, but I didn't want to encroach on the time that we've agreed. It's been a busy old day for you. I could have played that. There was a number of them, you see. And
damage limitation, attack the messenger, and in doing so, tarnish the message. It's classic what's happened today, Rich. Classic. But thanks to Mike Veal and the others in the team that investigated this, we have at least got, like I say, as much as we ever could have hoped for, given the pressures and because look, this network of the rich and famous and the politically powerful and the financially powerful, it doesn't just carry out paedophilia and Satanism. It's also there to cover it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I come back to this. How does a man, Jimmy Savile, who was a known record-breaking paedophile decade after decade after decade, who was introduced to the inner circle of the royal family in the 1960s, where the police knew about him, the intelligence agencies knew about him, special branch would have known about him, and yet he's allowed to stay in the inner circle of the royal family. He's allowed to be a bosom buddy of prime ministers and goes to his dying day without being arrested and charged. How does that happen in anything other than a controlled operation of protection and watching his back?
Can I ask
of course, it's front of our face, for goodness sake.
It's right in your face. I know that I know that you're under pressure time-wise, and I'm not going to put the rush on you, but I know you're only going to be with us for another couple of minutes. Can I just play 15 seconds of the clip of Edward Heath's godson? And I don't want to be knocking or criticising the godson. It could very well be the case that the man admired his godfather and didn't know anything about him. It could be that. But it was the turn of phrase that he used when he was explaining why Heath wouldn't do it. I thought it was strange, and we're not one for over-sensationalising stuff. I'm just going to play it and then get your response, David. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Have a listen to this, folks. This is Lincoln Seligman. He's the godson of Heath. He's obviously disgusted with the report. It's all a witch hunt, he says. He knows Heath for 50 years. Listen to how he describes why Heath wouldn't do it.
And there was nothing. When I grew up, I had probably a closer relationship with him, and I knew him to be a man of great integrity, and also just not so idiotic as to go and jeopardise his career and the things he wanted to achieve for himself and for the country by indulging in anything so dangerous and pointless.
David, child rape and abuse is not dangerous and pointless. It's sickening and evil beyond imagination. Why did he say idiotic to jeopardise his career by doing something so dangerous and pointless? It's far more serious than dangerous and pointless, right?
Yeah, well, only he knows that. But there's one or 2 points. First of all, he wouldn't be as stupid and to do such a dangerous thing to his career. These people don't do it as an add-on to their lives. It is their lives. It's part of their lives. It's part of who they are for reasons I explain in the books. So it's not a thing you say, "Oh, it would be bad for my career." They can't stop themselves. They can't help themselves. It's part of their persona, these particular networks and these particular bloodlines. And the other thing is, I've met people all over the world who were in their 30s and 40s, who grew up with their parents, who grew up with their fathers and didn't even know what their father was into. This is done in enormous secrecy by its very, very nature. They don't want this stuff to come out. And of course, the idea that Heath was a man of integrity is just extraordinary. He was devoid of integrity. He was the man, provable fact now, after government documents have been revealed under what's called the 30-year rule, when government documents are kept in secret and then released, well, some of them are, after 30 years. It's now clear and fact that he lied through his teeth about the consequences for Britain of going into the common market, now the European Union, because he knew that if people realised what he was giving away in terms of British sovereignty, that he'd agreed to destroy the British fishing industry, to destroy the British mining industry, to destroy manufacturing industry as it was then of course there'd have been a tremendous adverse reaction against what he wanted to do. So he lied. This is not a man of integrity. And of course, we also have this chief whip in the Ted Heath government, Tim Fortescue, who admitted in a BBC interview that they would protect paedophile politicians in Heath's party who had been abusing children, and they would protect them so that they could then, in effect, blackmail them from then on to vote the way the party hierarchy wanted them to vote. I mean, there's the chief whip of Heath's government admitting the connection to paedophilia and what he called abusing little boys. If you connect the dots, it's all there. But the mainstream media don't want to connect the dots. I mean, if that Sky News presenter and his like in the media actually went for this and took the establishment on and questioned the establishment about this whole subject, I mean, they wouldn't be in front of the camera for Sky News and the BBC and all the rest of them for very long. They know there's a line not to cross. They know there's a line to take. And today has been basically the media and the establishment versus Mike Veal. And that's why he needs our support and our gratitude, really, for having the guts to at least go this far.
Thanks for doing that. I appreciate you coming on short notice today. Really, really important that we keep talking about it. What I would like to, I can't add anything to what you said, how could I, but I would like to think that there are some good mainstream journalists left, maybe not on Sky and BBC, who might seek out some of the people who gave evidence to the inquiry. And if those people were happy to break anonymity and to come forward, to stand up against the nonsense from Mellor and from Heseltine and others. It would be nice to see that. But in the meantime, those people are always welcome to contact us through davidicke.com, to contact us if they want to tell their story in a way in which, if they want to be protected, we can protect their anonymity. But if they don't want it, they can do that as well. Huge, I suppose. Yeah, and like you said, fair play to Mike Veal, David, because as you've been reporting on davidicke.com since 2015, you've been writing about this for 2 years. Mike Veal's story, he's just had a torrent of nonsense to deal with, and abuse and undermining to come to terms with. And to be fair to him, he's done well to to get through all of that. So great stuff. Really appreciate you coming on to do that today.
Okay, I won't say it's a pleasure because it's a horrible subject, and but at least we put another flag in the sand, if you like, and we just have to keep going.
Absolutely. And if anybody wants to read The Biggest Secret, go to davidicke.com and order it. Thanks, David. Look after yourself. We'll talk real soon, no doubt.
Thanks, Rich.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for the help today. I really appreciate that. David Icke on the line to us from his home on the Isle of Wight.